The room smelled like old wood and expensive coffee, the kind you serve to make bad news feel civilized. The chairman cleared his throat, eyes skimming past me as if contact might contaminate him. We've unanimously decided that you're terminated. Security will escort you out immediately. Across the table, two colleagues smirked, already picturing my empty chair. I stood, thanked them for the clarity, and closed my notebook with the kind of calm that makes people nervous. They hadn't read the contract I signed 5 years ago. Or maybe they had and didn't understand it, which was worse. I walked the length of the glass hallway, my heels steady on the marble. No tears, no speech, no scene. In the elevator, the city's skyline slid past like a quiet endorsement. I caught my reflection and the corners of my mouth lifted. Monday would be fun. Back at my desk, I moved like I was packing for a quiet vacation. Photo of my mother, the fountain pen she gave me when I won my first client. A little ceramic fox my niece insisted was my focus animal. I left the company laptop like a molted shell. A junior associate watched me the way people watch a controlled burn, fascinated and a little afraid. "Good luck, Alice," he whispered. I didn't need luck. I had paragraphs. Paragraph 14C, to be exact. The key stewardship writer. I had insisted on it during the merger, when the new leadership wanted my book of business but not my voice. I gave them a smile and a choice. If you want my accounts, you protect my clients. We wrote it into the master service agreements and mirrored it in my employment contract. Changes to assigned account steward require the written consent of the steward of record for the duration of each active term. No transfer, no upsell, no renewal, no access without my signature. Not a ceremonial clause, an operational choke point. They got the revenue, I kept the keys. Most people read contracts like weather, vaguely and with a shrug. I read them like maps. That day, 5 years ago, legal rolled their eyes, finance muttered about process friction, and the chairman, yes, the same man, signed with a little laugh. "If it keeps you happy, Alice." He never asked why it would keep me safe. Outside, the air had the metallic bite of impending rain. I balanced the box against my hip and called Priya, my attorney, who speaks the language of leverage the way musicians hear chords. "It happened," I said. "Board vote. Security and everything she didn't waste sympathy on performance." "Do you have the writer copies in the MSA schedule?" "In the safe and on a drive." "Then breathe. Don't wave papers yet. Let them move first. Document every step. We'll be polite right up until we're final. Polite right up until we're final." It sounded like a motto. At home, I set the box down and poured tea. The way my mother taught me to mark endings and beginnings with heat and patience. I thought about Tom, my ex-husband who'd told me over takeout and a drifting marriage that I didn't have the stomach for boardrooms. He left with the dining table and the television. I kept the contracts. People divide up what they value most. I opened the folder labeled Writer Stewardship and ran my finger down the signatures. Not just mine, clients. Their names like anchor points across my career. Hospitals that trusted us with compliance, manufacturers with razor-thin margins, a nonprofit that couldn't afford a stumble. I wasn't sentimental about corporations, but I was devout about promises. That was the message beneath the legalese. I don't abandon people so a forecast looks prettier. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Tough break. "You okay?" "Heard about the vote." One from Karen, always the opportunist. "If you need referrals, I know a place hiring." I smiled at the ceiling. The thing about being underestimated is that it buys you time. They throw a party for your exit while you set the table for your return. I spent the evening making lists, the kind that calm my pulse. Inventory, all active MSAs, with Writer 14C attachment. Confirm renewal windows and notice periods. Draft courteous letters to clients. Stewardship continuity. Service stability. No changes without my consent. Schedule calls with 3 largest accounts. Ask for 5 minutes. Take 15. Leave with written confirmations. Prepare a memo to the board. Observe the writer or face material breach. No threats. No flame. Just paper and patience. I thought about the day I negotiated the writer. Back then, I still wore my wedding ring. Tom rolled it between his fingers like a coin and said, "Why make things harder?" Because one day I knew someone would make me disposable. Not the clients. The people who existed to be congratulated for making decisions others would have to clean up. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant. I pictured the boardroom, the way the chairman's mouth pinched when he said unanimous, as if consensus were virtue and not convenience. I imagined my colleagues at the after-work bar telling the story of how Alice took it so well, how she finally ran out of allies. They would forget that allies aren't always in the room. Sometimes they're in the footer of a contract and the inbox of a client who remembers who showed up on weekends. A text from my mother pinged. 3 words that land like a hand on the shoulder. Proud of you. She didn't ask for details. She trusted my compass. I looked out at the wet shine of the streetlights. Power, I've learned, isn't volume. It's continuity. Show up, do the work, leave a trail of signed truths. The board had chosen spectacle. I would choose sequence. Before bed, I printed the letters on thick paper. No drama, just clarity. As steward of record under Rider 14C, I will continue to authorize all account changes. There will be no disruption to your service. If anyone requests access or proposes a change, please direct them to me for written consent. I sealed the envelopes and placed them by the door like small, patient soldiers. I slept deeply. Anticipation can be loud, but reassurance is heavier. In the morning, I'd drop the letters, then walk to the small office I rented 2 blocks from the river. A room with light, a whiteboard, a lock. Not an empire, a position. They will try to move quickly, Priya had said. Let them. Speed without authority is just wind. And me? I had the keys. Monday would be fun. Monday morning arrived with a drizzle that glossed the sidewalks and made the city look like it had been polished overnight. I carried the envelopes in my tote bag. Their weight not physical, but deliberate. Each one was addressed to a client, each one a reminder that their trust was still tethered to me, not to the board that thought they had erased me with a vote. I walked into the post office just as the doors opened, the smell of ink and damp paper filling the air. One by one, I slid the envelopes across the counter. The clerk stamped them with a steady rhythm, and with each heavy thump of the seal, I felt the ground under my feet steady. By the time the last envelope disappeared into the bin, I knew the board's timeline had already been hijacked. They could plan whatever power plays they wanted. None of it would stick without my signature. Back at my apartment, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. A flood of messages waited. Some from old colleagues pretending to care. Others from people who had ignored me for years but suddenly found their curiosity awakened. But buried among them were the messages that mattered. Client replies. Thank you for the update, Alice. We prefer continuity, especially with you. Please confirm you'll remain our steward of record. We value your oversight. Board has contacted us about streamlining. We declined until we hear from you. Each message was oxygen. I typed back with measured calm. Yes, I remain the steward of record. No changes are authorized without my consent. No anger, no boasting, just quiet reinforcement. By mid-morning, Priya called. The first wave will hit today, she said. They'll contact clients, maybe try to access renewal portals. We've drafted a cease and desist template. Do nothing unless they overstep. Then we drop it like a hammer. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the sharpness beneath it, the kind of edge honed by years of watching arrogance collapse under paperwork. Clients are already writing back, I said. Good, she replied. Every reply is a nail in their coffin. Keep copies. I saved each confirmation in a folder labeled continuity. Watching it grow was like stacking bricks into a wall. By noon, Nell, one of the few colleagues I trusted, called from her personal phone. Her voice was hushed, as though she'd stepped into a stairwell. "Alice, it's chaos here. They're acting like you disappeared into thin air. Bryce tried to reassign your accounts to Karen, but IT flagged it. The system bounced him." I smiled into the silence. "The writer," I said. "Exactly. He lost it. Called IT useless, threatened to escalate. The chairman told him to keep it quiet. But word is spreading, let it spread," I said. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair. They were scrambling, already discovering the invisible walls I'd built years ago. They thought firing me had cleared the path, but every step forward was going to feel like running into glass. That evening, I met Priya at her office downtown. She handed me a folder with a neat stack of papers. "Status memo," she said. "Outlines the writer, client confirmations, and breach implications. If they try to touch a single account without you, we file immediately." I flipped through the pages, the legal language both clinical and strangely satisfying. "They'll fight it," I said. "Of course. They'll call you unreasonable, vindictive, say you're holding the company hostage. But contracts don't care about feelings. You gave them revenue. They gave you control. They signed it." We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the city outside muffled by glass. I thought of David, the old COO who had once told me, "In business, patience is louder than shouting." He'd retired years ago, long before the board grew arrogant, but his words lived in me. Walking home, I passed the tower where I had worked for nearly a decade. The lobby lights glowed warm against the rain, and silhouettes moved inside. I remembered the countless nights I'd stayed late there, fixing problems others had caused, polishing reports that would be presented under someone else's name. They had fired me to erase me. Instead, they had put me exactly where I needed to be, outside their walls, but still inside their system. When I reached my apartment, my phone buzzed again. A message from Nell. "They just told staff you were redundant. People are laughing in the break room. They think you'll be gone for good." I typed back, "Let them laugh. Monday is just beginning." I set my phone down and poured a glass of wine, watching the droplets of rain streak down the window. Somewhere in a polished boardroom, they were congratulating themselves on streamlining operations. They didn't know that the ink on their own signatures had already sealed their undoing. The truth was simple. They had fired me, but they couldn't touch what mattered most. My clients, my reputation, the trust built one late night and one solved crisis at a time. That wasn't theirs to take. It was mine to protect. And as I looked at the folder on my desk, paragraph 14C underlined, signatures crisp and clear, I felt no fear, only certainty. They thought the story had ended, but in reality, it had only just begun. By Tuesday morning, the whispers had turned into ripples. Nell texted before I'd even finished my coffee. "Bryce lost it in the meeting. He tried to show the chairman new account plans, but finance refused to approve without your signature. He called you a ghost haunting the company. A ghost." I almost laughed. Ghosts vanish. I was everywhere, just invisible to them until I wanted otherwise. I spent the morning reviewing renewal schedules. 3 major contracts, worth more than half the quarterly forecast, were entering the 90-day window. Each one carried rider 14C. Without my approval, they couldn't renew, upsell, or even negotiate scope. If they tried, it would trigger material breach. I drafted polite notes to each client, thanking them for their partnership and confirming continuity of stewardship. No legal threats, just reassurance. By noon, my phone rang. The number was familiar. Anderson Medical, my largest client. "Is it true?" the CFO asked without introduction. "We heard you were terminated." "The board sent someone else to our office yesterday. We told them to leave." I kept my voice steady. "Yes, the board voted to end my employment. But as you know, I remain your steward of record under the rider. There will be no changes without my authorization. A pause, then a sigh of relief. Good. We don't want chaos. We trust you, Alice. Keep us posted after the call. I sat back in my chair. Trust. That was the currency the board had never understood. They thought contracts were cages. For me, they were bridges. By late afternoon, Nell called again. They're furious. The chairman demanded IT unlock the renewal portals. Compliance refused. Said the system is tied to legal contracts and can't be overridden. Bryce shouted about finding loopholes, but the general counsel warned against it. They're boxed in. They boxed themselves in, I corrected. That night, I met Priya at a small cafe near her office. She looked as sharp as ever, legal pad balanced on her knees. We need to decide when to go public, she said. Right now, it's rumor inside the company. But once investors hear clients won't move without you, pressure multiplies. I stirred my tea slowly. Not yet. David always told me, let them show their hand first. They're still underestimating me. That's my advantage. Priya nodded. Then be patient. But document everything. Screenshots, emails, call logs. If they claim you're interfering, we'll need proof it's stewardship, not sabotage. Walking home, I thought about Tom again. My ex had once mocked me for obsessing over details. You write contracts like you're preparing for a war that will never come, he'd said. He couldn't see that wars don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, in the form of a vote, a smirk across a table, and a security escort. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Nell. A photo of Bryce standing outside the boardroom, face red, hands cutting the air. The caption read, "He's unraveling." I stared at the photo, then at the folder on my desk. Patience, I reminded myself. Let them twist. The next morning, Wednesday, I visited the modest office I'd rented downtown. A single desk, a filing cabinet, and a whiteboard. No prestige, but privacy. I pinned the renewal schedule to the board and circled the 3 major contracts. 90 days. That was my runway. If the board didn't reconcile with me before then, they would face a revenue collapse they couldn't explain away. At 10 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was a different client. Wexler Manufacturing. The operations director sounded irritated. Why are we hearing different stories? The board told us you're gone, but yesterday your email said you remain our steward. Both are true, I said calmly. They ended my employment. But under Rider 14C, I am still your account steward until your contract ends. That was the agreement they signed. Nothing changes without my written consent. Silence on the line, then a low laugh. So they fired you but kept you? That's rich. We'll stick with you, Alice. Don't worry. When I hung up, I let myself laugh too. Fired but kept. The irony was almost artful. That evening, Priya called again. They'll try to paint you as vindictive. Expect press leaks. Disgruntled ex-employee clinging to contracts. Don't react. Let the client speak for you. Their loyalty is your shield. I can handle being underestimated, I said. It's familiar ground. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, the board was drafting memos, rehearsing strategies, convincing themselves they still held control. But control isn't in titles or board votes. It's in trust, in paper, in signatures that don't vanish because someone wants them to. I closed the folder and whispered into the quiet. You fired me to erase me. Instead, you locked yourself out. The first cracks had already appeared, and soon the whole facade would crumble. By Thursday morning, the board's confidence was starting to fray. I didn't need inside sources to know it. The evidence arrived in my inbox. A client forwarded me an email from Bryce himself. The subject line read, "Seamless transition." The body promised new leadership, renewed focus, and dedicated account support. It was written in the kind of corporate fluff that looks convincing until you read the fine print. At the bottom, in smaller font, was the real attempt. Please confirm authorization to transition your account steward. The client's note to me was short. We declined. Only you have our trust. I saved the message and smiled. They were moving from arrogance to desperation, and desperation always left fingerprints. By mid-morning, Nell called again. Her voice was sharp, like she'd been holding it in too long. Alice, it's bad here. They're fighting in every meeting. The chairman keeps insisting the writer can't possibly bind the company. Legal is panicking because the contracts are ironclad. Bryce shouted that you'd forged the signatures. IT proved they came from DocuSign with board approval. He stormed out. They're showing their hand, I said quietly. More than that. People are scared. Staff are whispering about clients pulling out. No one knows who to listen to. I thanked her and ended the call, my mind racing. Fear spreads faster than confidence. And once staff start doubting leadership, investors aren't far behind. That afternoon, Priya and I met in her office again. She slid a printed article across the table. The headline made me exhale through my nose. Former vice president allegedly blocks company operations with contract loophole. The article quoted an unnamed senior executive calling me unstable and vengeful. They're leaking to the press, Priya said flatly. This is strategy. They want to frame you before you go public? I read the piece twice, each word a small sting, but not enough to wound. It won't matter, I said. Clients know the truth. And investors don't care about gossip. They care about revenue. Priya leaned back in her chair. Still, perception matters. If this escalates, we'll need to show your restraint. No retaliatory statements. Let the documents and the client speak. I nodded, though anger simmered beneath my calm. They wanted me emotional, reactive, sloppy. They still didn't understand. I wasn't here to burn them down. I was here to hold them accountable. On my walk home, I passed the company tower again. Through the tall glass windows, I saw staff clustered in corners, eyes darting, whispers spreading like wildfire. I remembered standing in those same corners years ago, invisible, my work absorbed into someone else's credit. Now, they had tried to erase me with a vote, but all they'd done was turn my absence into the loudest voice in the building. That night, I opened my laptop and organized the growing evidence. Client confirmations, forwarded emails, screenshots of the board's contradictory statements. Each one was a brick, and together they formed a wall no accusation could break. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Bryce. His voice was low, falsely calm, but every word trembled with fury. Alice, be reasonable. This will ruin you. Come back tomorrow, we'll negotiate a soft landing. Don't push this further, I forwarded the recording to Priya. Her reply came minutes later. Preserve it. It proves pressure tactics. Don't respond. I poured a glass of wine and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had spent years dismissing me as background noise. Now, their entire empire was shaking because of a clause they'd signed to keep me happy. On Friday morning, the first real sign of collapse arrived. A message from Anderson Medical's CFO. The board contacted us again. We reminded them our contract is bound by Rider 14C. Unless you confirm, no action will be taken. We also informed our legal counsel. The moment I read the last line, I knew the game had changed. Clients weren't just loyal. They were mobilizing. The board wasn't up against me anymore. They were up against the very people who paid the bills. That afternoon, Priya called with a final note of clarity. They're running out of moves. Next week, we take it to investors. Quietly, professionally, with the paperwork in hand. You don't need to shout. You just need to show up. I closed my eyes for a moment, hearing David's words in my head. The old COO who had believed in me long before anyone else did. Patience is louder than shouting. The board had shouted themselves hoarse, and I was still silent. still steady. The cracks had widened. By next week, the whole structure would come down. Monday morning, the air felt different. The drizzle had cleared, leaving the streets sharp and bright, as if the city itself was waiting for something to unfold. I buttoned my navy jacket, slipped the folder of documents into my briefcase, and walked to the office tower I hadn't entered since the day they escorted me out. Security hesitated when I gave my name. I slid across an envelope on Priya's letterhead. Inside were instructions citing my authority as steward of record for every major client account, signed and witnessed. The guard scanned the pages, then handed me a visitor's badge without a word. I didn't need fanfare. Silence suited me. The boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Polished table, leather chairs, the skyline stretching behind glass. They were all there. The chairman, Bryce, the others, clustered in suits that looked more like armor now. When I walked in, their heads snapped up. "What is she doing here?" Bryce barked, already red. I set my briefcase down, calm and deliberate. "I'm here as steward of record for every active client account, which means any discussion of operations, revenue, or renewals includes me." The chairman cleared his throat. His voice strained. "Alice, as you know, your employment was terminated. This meeting is for leadership." I opened the folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. Client letters, confirmations, each one signed, dated, and bound by Writer 14C. "Leadership?" I said quietly. "Clients don't follow titles. They follow contracts. And these are clear. Nothing moves without me." They leaned in, scanning the signatures. I watched the progression of their faces, confusion, disbelief, then the pale realization that they had trapped themselves. "This is obstruction," Bryce snapped. "You're holding the company hostage." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm protecting the clients who pay for your bonuses." "You fired me. That was your choice. But firing me didn't erase the obligations you signed." The chairman tried to rally. "Even if these riders are enforceable, investors won't tolerate this chaos. You're destabilizing the company." I let the words hang, then placed my phone face up on the table. A name flashed across the screen. "Anderson Medical." I answered, my voice steady. "Yes, I'm in the boardroom now." "Of course, I'll ensure continuity. We'll move forward once agreements are honored." When I ended the call, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. "Investors already know," I said softly. "They don't want excuses. They want stability, and stability requires respecting the contracts that keep the revenue flowing." For the next hour, they scrambled, arguing technicalities, muttering about litigation, trying to paint me as unreasonable. I answered each calmly, citing the clause, the signatures, the confirmations. Every protest only underscored how little ground they had left. Finally, I stood, gathering my papers. "Gentlemen, I'll give you until Friday to adjust. Either acknowledge my authority as steward of record, or I'll move discussions directly to investors. You know as well as I do what that would mean for your seats at this table." Without waiting for a response, I left the room. The hallway was lined with staff pretending not to listen, their eyes flicking toward me with something between curiosity and relief. I offered a small, calm smile as I passed. Power doesn't need volume. It needs presence. By Tuesday afternoon, the first cracks became collapses. The company secretary circulated a memo acknowledging my stewardship. By Wednesday, 3 directors had resigned for personal reasons. And by Thursday, investors issued a statement. "We support continuity of stewardship and look forward to renewed focus under Alice's leadership." Bryce tried one last time. He cornered me outside the elevator, his voice low and bitter. "You think this is a victory? You'll drown in responsibility. You don't know what it's like to carry it." I met his glare without flinching. "You're right. Responsibility is heavy. That's why you kept dropping it." On Friday morning, I walked into the boardroom again. This time to silence, no protests, no smirks. I took the head seat, opened my notebook, and began. The company belongs to its clients, its employees, and its shareholders, not to egos. That ends today. I outlined the plan. Freeze non-essential spending, audit renewals, shift bonuses to gross margin, establish an independent audit chair. No grand speeches, just actions. They listened because they had no choice. That evening, back in my small office downtown, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked at the stack of contracts on my desk. They weren't weapons. They were promises. Promises to clients who trusted me, to staff who deserved better, and to myself. That I would never again let others decide my worth. Revenge had never been the goal. The goal was respect, accountability, justice. And justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, steady and unshaken, written in ink years before anyone knew it would matter. The board had underestimated me. They thought I was finished. But in the end, all they had done was hand me control. And this time, it would be on my terms.